Hello, travelers. Welcome to Lore Spire. Today we're talking about Dark Envoy, a co-op CRPG by Event Horizon that is supposed to be released later this year. We just finished streaming the demo for this game last week, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. The protagonists of Dark Envoy are a brother and sister duo named Malachi and Kaela. They live on Ja'an, a world that has the older, more magically gifted races of elves and orcs warring with the younger, more technologically advanced humans. So maybe not the most original story setup, but it does provide plenty of opportunity to tell an epic story. The character creation in the demo is pretty solid, maybe even solid plus, depending on what you value in a character creator. Not a whole wide variety of faces here. Hopefully we'll have more to go on there whenever the actual game releases. But I feel like the other options are pretty varied and reasonable. And I was actually able to find a look that I really liked for both Malachi and Kaela. So yeah, I would definitely say that the demo succeeds here, and hopefully we see a little bit more of a variety of options with the actual game release. All right, now if we come over here to classes, there are only 4 that you can choose from, which is a little bit lacking: Warrior, Ranger, Engineer, and Adept. Okay, but each one does have 4 specializations, which seems like where the variety is really going to come in. So that's, if you count the specializations, that's 16 different character builds you could possibly come up with here. Okay, and that's not including the stat choices you make or anything like that. Now I am particularly interested in trying out the Sharpshooter and the Chaos Walker here for the Ranger, and then the Chaos Shard for the Adept. Those are the ones that strike me as the most interesting. Guardian seems like it would make a really good tank. Assassin maybe a good single target damage dealer. And then over here for the Engineer, Technomancer seems really interesting, and Constructor. Those are definitely the 2 that interest me most there. So you choose your classes here for each of your characters, whichever classes you want. You head on over to attributes, and everything starts at 5. You can raise or lower the stats from here, but 5 is kind of the baseline. You get no additional bonuses from having 5, but you also don't get any negatives. You can see if you drop it down to 4, you start taking negatives in the stats that the attributes affect. And if you raise it over 5, then you start getting bonuses for these stats that those attributes affect. All right, let's see. Last up, we have equipment. And I think that this is actually pretty cool because depending on the class you choose, you can choose a different set of equipment to start out with, which is a nice little touch. I don't think it matters all that much because any character in this game can use any equipment that they want. And in the demo, at least, we did find upgrades for the equipment fairly quickly. But still, it's a nice little touch to have. Once you have your characters created, you'll go through the typical easy kind of tutorial area that you see in a lot of these games, just kind of teaching you how to play. And here's actually where I had my biggest issue with the demo. Immediately, I tried to remap the key bindings, and well, it didn't work. I actually lost my ability to use any abilities at all whenever I tried remapping the key bindings, and I messed around with it for a good 30 or 45 minutes trying to find a setup that would allow me to use abilities and allow me to map the key bindings in a way that made sense to me. Eventually, I just gave up and I went with the default settings, and that worked just fine. The only thing that kind of sucks about that is that the default settings do require you to use the arrow keys to navigate the map, and then they require you to use like the WASD area of the keyboard to activate your abilities down here. So that's a little bit terrible. However, this is just a demo, and I'm sure that Event Horizon will have that fixed by the time that the game actually releases. Now, I want to take a moment to ask you to do me a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons if you have not already. Okay, it's a free way to show support for the channel and it really does help us out. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. And if you want to go a step further in showing your support, then check out the Join Lorespire channel membership button just underneath this video. All right, you can see all the perks that you'll get, and if you could show us some support by getting a channel membership, that also would be awesome. And we have a link to our Patreon down in the description if you want to check that out. Now I'd like to thank poopSMASH and UnsungNPC for being Lorespire channel member super supporters. Thanks guys for supporting us the way that you do. Back to the video. Once you get out of the beginning area, combat becomes much more fast-paced. Much more difficult, and as a result, much more fun. You can see here we're actually able to kind of hack this robot. So there are times where you can use the environment to your advantage. And yeah, battles will just get more difficult once you get out of the starting area. Enemies will start flanking you, surrounding you, back attacking you. Oh, you can see right there. They just dropped down some enemies behind us. So now we're kind of surrounded. And we're going to have to deal with that. Okay, the ability to pause or slow time is definitely extremely helpful in these instances. But even with that, you have to be able to adapt quickly to the changes on the battlefield because they are sometimes very challenging. As you can see here, we're kind of getting our butts kicked a little bit. Hopefully, if we can get away here, our flame turtle maybe help a little bit with that. Anyways, in situations like this where you're getting overwhelmed, there are different tactics that you can employ. Sometimes you can duck behind cover, and sometimes it'll actually be best to just kind of start tanking enemies. And in this case, I feel like maybe kind of kiting them around is going to be our best option. Okay, but it's actually really cool that that there are so many viable ways and strategies to be able to employ in battle to make things more effective. It's a lot of fun, and it's interesting to kind of figure out what works for you and what works in particular encounters.
Sorry about that.
So the demo wasn't really long enough to be able to gauge the story very well, or the characters. I will say that the characters banter back and forth was sometimes amusing, other times it felt kind of flat. But there is one interesting part here that we do get to experience in the demo, and that is story choices. Okay, and this is basically once you come to a certain part in the story, you are given a choose your path option, and you decide how you want to deal with a certain situation. You know, usually this would just be done in text boxes, but text boxes with choices are not how they decided to go here. And I think that this is pretty interesting. We don't really get to see these play out a whole lot in the demo, but if they can make these story choices significantly change your playthrough, then it would add a lot of replay value to the game and certainly make your playthrough a lot more interesting. So I'm kind of hopeful that Event Horizon does well with these story choices that they're implementing here. Leveling up in Dark Envoy is about what you would expect. You get some attribute points and you can put them in whichever stat you want to increase so that you can kind of customize your character the way that you want. The much more interesting part than attribute points is actually skill points that you get. And skill points, they do employ a kind of tech tree system here. And anyways, at each level, you get access to the next level of your tech tree here. And you have 2 skill points. If you spend 1 skill point, this will go up by 1. You spend another, it'll go up by 2. So basically, you just decide which skills you want and which skills you want to improve here. You do seem to get more points as you get to higher levels, so it's not always just 2. You know, nothing groundbreaking here, but I still think that it's a solid system that I've found fun in other games and I think will work well for Dark Envoy. Now, looking at the crafting system that they have here in the demo, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but I still found it fun and interesting. It's really accessible. And the stuff that they had at vendors was not nearly as good as what I could craft for myself. And what I could craft for myself was also better than most of the stuff that I was finding in the field. So I think that that's really cool, and I really hope that they keep it so that crafting is the primary way that you're upgrading your gear, because it's just a fun and interesting thing you can do that is not overly complicated in this game. But basically, you just have to acquire a pattern. You can either find those or you can purchase them from a craftsman at the town. And anyways, you pick what you want to make. Like we can make this Marauder rifle here. You pick the metal you want, which we only have iron. And then you pick the rarity that you want. Okay, and the more rare you want to make it, the more resources it takes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make a legendary here real quick. You pre-craft the item. And this right here is definitely what it gets. These over here are random stats. If there's one that you don't like let's just say, I don't want that weapon damage, I want something else. You can re-roll it for the, a cost of resources. And sometimes you get the same one again whenever you re-roll it. But it's not too expensive to re-roll. Anyways, once you have a stat that you like, you can go ahead and... Oh, we got to unclick those. Craft the item. Okay, and that's really all that there is to it. Possibly they may make this a little more in-depth. Remember, this is only a demo, but I feel like it's fun and it's cool that you can get really good gear this way. And instead of making it something that's incredibly difficult to do that requires really rare resources, which is what most games tend to do with these kinds of crafting systems, instead they seem to be taking the approach that you're going to commonly get what you need to craft stuff, and then crafting is going to be your primary way of upgrading your gear. At least that's what it seems like to me, and I really like that approach. I think it's going to be fun and awesome. I hope they stick with it. All right, that pretty much hits all of the highlights from the demo, and I just want to say that after playing the demo for Dark Envoy, it is now on my top 3 list of 2023 games to play, only behind Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield. So be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Dark Envoy content as it develops further, and for other CRPG content as well. This has been Chris with LoreSpire. Be well, my friends.